well have enough hydrocarbons to last for 600 years. We've also got enough nuclear warheads to blow up the whole fucking planet. I suggest we don't use either. I ask myself every day how on earth we can live together. And every day there are more and more and more of us. In fact, every day there are 100 million acts of sexual intercourse. 375,000 of us are born. 175,000 of us die. That means that this evening, 205,000 more people will sit down for supper than had breakfast this morning. We live in an increasingly resource-constrained world. If we're not to be defined by that resource constraint, we need to do some things differently. Now, capitalism may have caused many of the problems we face today, but it is also the only tool that is strong enough to get us out of the problems we face. We need to use entrepreneurs to get busy fixing the future. There's no question that a future, from where I stand, is pretty broken. I mean, we depend for our very lives on our water, our land, and our seas. And all those ecosystems around us are degrading very, very rapidly indeed. I mean, water, we take water for granted. We're talking about the molecules in you of Einstein and everybody else. Actually, what's more interesting for me is the virtual trade in water. Your mobile phone takes 25,000 litres of water to make. When they dam the Yangtze to make your iPads in China and ship them to America, they're shipping water. When America grows beef on grain on its Great Plains to ship to the Middle East, what it's shipping is condensed water. It also takes 25,000 litres of water to make a kilo of beef. If the Middle East had water, they'd grow their own cows. Our land and our seas are also suffering, and I'm sure you know about these, but what people don't understand is the business side of it, the business side of the environment that people aren't looking at. And the seas in particular. In 2011, a single tuna sold at the opening of Tokyo's Fukushima market for $375,000. People thought, how interesting, somebody's paying $370,000 for a fish. At the opening of the Fukushima market in February 2012, a single tuna sold for $730,000. What the markets are telling us very clearly is that mature bluefin tuna are rarer than rhino horn, because a rhino horn's only $440,000. Anybody fancy a bluefin tuna sandwich? So we live in this increasingly constrained world, and people have blamed business. And I think it's fair to blame business. I call myself an environmental entrepreneur, an eco-capitalist. Why? Because I'm both. I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a capitalist. During the Industrial Revolution, it was very difficult to be both. In fact, you had to be schizophrenic. But the Industrial Revolution is now over, and the sustainability revolution has started. Any business that doesn't make that transition will fail. And as we manage this transition, how we manage this transition from Industrial Revolution to Sustainability Revolution will define the experience of the 21st century for everybody in this room. Now, as we move into the Sustainability Revolution for entrepreneurs like me, it's opening up whole new vistas, whole new industries that nobody could foresee, even just a short period of time ago. I sold all my Industrial Revolution businesses in 2008, and since then have only invested and started in businesses that are busy, what I call, repairing the future. So it's not about sustainable development, it's about sustainable retreat, doing less harm to the planet on which we live. Otherwise, there will be nothing left for us. I'm just going to tell you about 3 of those businesses and then hand over to the questions. These are some of my very unusual businesses. The first one's called AgriProtein. AgriProtein is the world's largest farmer by a very long way. We call it small stock farming. We have roughly 500 million flies in cages in Stellenbosch in South Africa. We breed those flies and we get them to lay their eggs in one place. We then take those eggs and we feed those eggs to those flies with blood and guts, predominantly blood, from abattoirs, from slaughterhouses in the Western Cape near where I live. 1 kilo of fly eggs grows exponentially into 380 to 420 kilos of wriggly larvae. Those larvae are, by their very nature, animal protein, and 55% protein at that. And we grind up that larvae, and we dry it, and we feed it to fish and to chickens, instead of fish from our seas. 1/3 of all the fish we take from our seas, 27.3 million tons a year, is ground up and made into fish meal to go into our industrial agricultural businesses. It's unnecessary. Any fisher person in the world will tell you There's only two ways to catch a fish in the freshwater system. It's tie a fly onto the end of the line and cast it on the water, or put a maggot onto the end of the hook and drop it into the water. It's what fish have always eaten. It's why a trout leaps out of a stream to get a fly. Yet when we industrialized our fish production and our chicken production, we never industrialized their natural source of protein, flies and larvae. All we've done is simply recreate that entirely natural process, take waste, or what other people think of waste, blood and guts, use nature, the fly, to make larvae and make a very valuable protein source. Fish meal today is $1,730 a ton this morning. We make our protein at $800 a ton. It's a natural alternative, it's sustainable, and our large factories make 100 tons a day of protein. So it's also extremely profitable. We're a business busy repairing the future and saving our seas one fish at a time. Every time I walk past one of those factories, I can see 100 tons of larvae coming out. It's 100 tons of fish we don't have to take from our seas, and we can continue to feed our fish and our chickens on what they have been eating for the last 47 million years until humans came along. One of our capital constraints in this business, and it's interesting, so we take it for granted that we recycle our paper, our glass, and our plastic. Within 5 to 10 years from now, we will consider it normal to recycle our waste nutrients. That's all we're doing. It's what the fly does in nature. When an animal dies in the bush, flies lie on it, the larvae, the eggs hatch, the larvae eat, and funny enough, disinfect the carcass, and then move on and get eaten by birds or fish. I mean, Genghis Khan was the first person to really use a fly. He would never go into battle without a cartload of flies. He would take the larvae from his carts of rotting meat, and he'd put them on the wounds of his soldiers, and it would disinfect and clean up the wounds. Because you can hold a handful of larvae, they cannot eat you. They can eat only broken and damaged cells, which is why they're nature's cleaning machine. They're a much misunderstood creature. But anyway, one of our cost constraints is having large cages of flies. And in there we have half boys and half girls. Now, I'm no farmer, I'm an entrepreneur, but I do understand that I've never seen in a field 12 cows and 12 bulls. I also worked out that boys don't lay eggs. So I went along to see the guys who'd decoded the genome of the fly to see if they could help with me sorting out these boys and girls business. And the fly was the second animal after the human to have its genome mapped. Why? Because every single place on the planet where there are humans, there are also flies. And they said, no, we've done something much more interesting. I said, well, what's that? So we've decoded the genome of the mosquito. I said, that's interesting, it's fun, it's intellectual, but what's it got to do with me? I'm a businessman. They said, we've got a business idea. I said, business ideas and mosquitoes? They said, well, you grow flies, listen. So I did. And what they'd done is quite extraordinary. They developed two genes. The first gene is a gene that stains the protein, the meat, of any animal red under ultraviolet light. You choose your color, but red is what they chose. The second gene renders this particular mosquito, Aedes aegypti, that carries dengue fever, sterile. Now, Brazil spends $900 million a year on pesticides, fogging trucks, driving up and down the street in order to try and kill mosquitoes that make 1 million of its people ill a year with dengue fever that cost them $400 million to treat. The thing about mosquitoes is two things. Firstly, the boys live outside because they're pollinators. That's all they do. The girls live inside in your sock drawer because they want your blood for their eggs. It's a bit like the flies and the eggs. They need your blood to make their eggs grow. The other thing about mosquitoes, it only moves about 300 meters in its lifetime. So what these guys had invented is a sterile male mosquito that's identifiable. Instead of using pesticides that kills entire ecosystems, in various villages and towns in Brazil now, we're releasing around the villages in a 300-meter radius our sterile males. Now, they don't know they're sterile, so they go out and they mate with a wild female. The female lays their eggs, and the eggs will never hatch. Now, this isn't a Frankenstein technology, because the one thing in this world you cannot inherit is sterility, because if your parents were sterile, you would never have been born. So all it does, like a pesticide, is reduces the amount of female biting mosquitoes in and around human settlements. In fact, we're going to do it for the 2014 World Cup and the 2018 Olympics. So instead of releasing clouds of insecticides, we release clouds of our male mosquitoes in a 300-meter radius. And for one generation, because they can only move 300 meters in lifetime, which is 6 weeks, there will be no female mosquitoes next to where the humans are. We've just finished the genome of the cotton bollworm, which is the singular pest that attacks cotton fields. If you go to a cotton field normally, there's nothing in there. There's no birds, there's no bats, there's no flies, there's no rats, there's no snakes, there's nothing, it's dead. You go to one of our trial cotton fields, and in those cotton fields you will find absolutely everything except the one pest, the cotton bollworm, that eats the cotton plants. Because why? We've used sex and nature and the urgent need to reproduce by releasing sterile males that are identifiable into the field. A farmer can go along with a card, they can trap the cotton bollworm, put a torch on them and say, Jason's bollworms, nature's bollworms, we're happy. With that business, we want to put out of business pesticide manufacturers, because pesticide manufacturers ruin entire ecosystems. They poison us and poison our food, and we need to look for alternatives. So just like with the fly business, we want to put out of business the fish meal fishermen, and we will do by creating a better, cheaper, natural alternative. In the same way with pesticides, we want to put these guys out of business, and we want to be the solution for the monocultures we still need so that we can get T-shirts at $5 a time rather than $30 a time. I can tell you about one last business, which is, again, equally left field. I call it, well, I'll tell you what it is. It's taking the piss out of the slums. So in the slums in Kenya, in where there is no water, no electricity, no sewerage, we have delivered the first toilets. We build prefabricated toilets out of concrete and mesh, and we put them on the ground. Well, we sell them. We sold our first one to our first entrepreneur, a woman living in the slums. She bought the loo and didn't believe that we'd do what we said we'd do, is pick up the poo and the wee every single day for $100 a year. She then charges the people living around her in 25 meters direction. There are about 130 people. This is 250,000 people living on 15 or 20 hectares. And she then charges the inhabitants near her 5 Kenyan shillings, 3 US cents, 1 or 2% of their income to use the loos. The first people who use the loos are the women, who otherwise have to defecate in the streets and therefore get up at 4 in the morning when there are fewer people around. That entrepreneur, like the 200 colleagues she now has in the slums of Kenya, earn on average $8 a day. That's 4 times the slum average income. They are entrepreneurs. They are also clearing up the environment, because around where they operate these toilets, there's less human fecal matter and less disease. So we come along and we take away the poo and the piss every day in these 2 containers that sit underground in these loos. The poo we compost and we get about $25 US a ton. It sort of pays the running costs of the business. Now, the piss is very interesting. This month, we may well get to as many as 100,000 litres of piss. We get on average for our piss $2.64 a litre, which is substantially more than some of my neighbours get for their very good wine from their wine farms. And why is it so valuable? It's very simple. We take the pee out and we put it into 1,500-litre containers. We leave it in the sun for 2 to 3 months. During that time, all the volatiles evaporate, the alcohols and everything else. Any genetic matter is broken down by the nitrogen and the phosphates in the pee. At the end of it, you're left with basically 531 liquid fertilizer. We then sell that to the coffee farmers in Kenya, who put it into their drip irrigation systems to grow their coffee plants, because pouring granulated NPK onto the ground is of little use when there's no rain, when you're feeding your plants with drip irrigation systems. We're just starting now a similar type of project in Kinshasa, where we're going to take the piss out of Kinshasa. And what we're going to do there is sell it to the rice farmers. I mean, what madness to go and make fertilizer, crack gas, dry it into pellets, and then throw it into paddy fields that are full of water. Why not just put the 531 fertilizer into it, which is exactly what we do. So in the east of Africa and in the west of Africa, we're taking the piss out of the slums. Not happy with this, I was in Johannesburg just a few weeks back and went to see Growthpoint, one of the very large property-owning companies in South Africa. And I explained to them about my business. We do some other stuff together as well. And I said, you know, look, I want to balance up this business. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I'd like to take the piss out of the rich as well. And so we've come to an initial deal where we're going to link up the urinals in 2 or 3 of their very large shopping malls, straight into the underground car parks, into containers. We'll take them out of there, and we'll sell them to the wine farmers of the Western Cape. So everywhere I look around the world, yes, we're in problems, but yes, entrepreneurs can get us out of some of the problems we face. We need to think a bit differently, we need to think a bit more cleverly, and we need to have some fun doing it. There's an immense amount of great things going on around the world. We don't have to give up capitalism, but we have to get more inventive about using it to fix our future. Thank you for listening.